Greetings, America. We are currently engaged in a behind-the-scenes fight for the soul of our republic. Never before has our nation faced such a dire threat. While President Trump secures our nation's command and control system from the ongoing coup d'etat, the Democrats and globalists have turned to foreign nations and think tanks to do their dirty work. By using foreign intelligence groups and contractors, the globalist traitors within our government can conceal their crimes from the president. The deep state has created over 60 distinct organizations for the purposes of disseminating disinformation, propaganda, and censorship. Most of these think tanks and groups are dominated by members of the Atlantic Council. The inner workings of some of these organizations have been exposed by patriots within our intelligence community and citizens working together to end corruption. While we have an opportunity to smoke out the globalists, we must also be careful for these scared and desperate criminals to do something drastic to protect themselves from exposure. The globalists need an opportunity to deny the authority of the Justice Department. One of the ways they can do this is by causing a violent conflict inside our country. Be careful of people who push the idea of violent conflict. The patriots are still in power, and the globalist traitors are running scared. If we do not share important information, our nation will fall. Forever.
Since Russia is clearly backing Republicans, why don't we ask China to back us?
I hereby tonight ask China.
That's right. And not only that, China, if you're listening, why don't you get Trump's tax returns? I'm sure our media would richly reward you.
This is an emergency transmission from deep in the heart of Texas. The U.S. resistance against a global corporate combine empowered and funded by Communist China, allied with the big mega banks that set up Communist China in 1949. The Communist Chinese have taken control of U.S. telecommunications infrastructure. The Communist Chinese have taken control of Hollywood. The Communist Chinese have taken control of the main universities. This is all confirmed. This is not a drill. Big tech in Silicon Valley is almost completely run by the Communist Chinese government. They've officially become state-run. Apple, 100%. Google is now making the transition and announcing a merger and total worldwide censorship. They are now beta testing using me as the straw man, a demonized version of Alex Jones, to do that. This is happening. This is not like the other probes before that were meant to get you used to probes and censorship, thinking you would adapt to censorship by just putting up with it. Now this attack is thousands and thousands and thousands of times the magnitude of all previous attacks. This is a titrated dose, reverse psychological warfare operation using adapt and overcome subversion paradigm manipulation. In layman's terms, they are manipulating the fact that we adapt to being oppressed. We adapt to being pressed at the low dosages of oppression. Now when the megaton hits us of the total takeover, we try to adapt to the poison infusion instead of not knowing it's a lethal dose if we accept the dose. Total Internet of Things, integration, global social score, complete command and control system. It is the virtual reality AI weapon system now attacking the United States with traitors inside the major security agencies, blocking Trump's resistance of the program and attempting to stop us from removing the tentacles of the Chi-Com/Big Tech banking combine emergency situation. I have been chosen for destruction because I brought you this information and have been ramming it out as much as I can. They want to double use me, as they always do in any complex system of mathematical deception, where every angle of my good is turned against us. So they take what I've said, being sincere, build me into an insincere person in the straw man. I'm a person that cares about life and children and is against these wars. And so they make me a herder of children. And then they build me into this lie to then set the distraction while they're actually censoring all of you to make a debate about Alex Jones. So even if I didn't sell out to them, they've now used me as an archetype to serve them by being the main distraction. I have now been captured by the enemy in the information warfare fulcrum and is being used against you. Only your full understanding of this key will break you free from this paradigm. I have given you the transmission. Now break free.
I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man. Thomas Jefferson. If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.
Released in 2017, David Brock's classified documents representing the progressive groups Share Blue Media, Media Matters, Crew, and American Bridge uncovered a battle plan where corporocratic strings are pulled and fundamental free speech laws are crossed, and a ministry of truth emerges from the Soros network of nonprofits. A mission statement that basically says if you can't beat them, destroy them. In the section dedicated to media matters, Brock's vision declares that serial misinformers and right-wing propagandists will be exposed and discredited. Internet and social media platforms like Google and Facebook will no longer uncritically and without consequence host and enrich fake news sites and so-called propaganda. But it is Brock that is riding a wave of corporate propaganda. The 2012 bipartisan Smith-Mundt Modernization Act overturned a 64-year ban on the domestic dissemination of propaganda, essentially allowing mainstream media to unleash globalist propaganda on American viewers. Presently, the propaganda governor has been removed, and the big six media corporations are holding all the cards. The document then goes on to brag that Media Matters secured access to raw data from Facebook, Twitter, and social media sites. The ethics watchdog arm, Crew, predicted Trump would be brought down using damaging information, and that Trump would eventually have to defend illegal conduct in court. Another section of the Brock document spotlights his answer to alternative media, Share Blue Media. A severely arrogant and delusional Brock claims that Share Blue Media will become the de facto news outlet for opposition leaders and the grassroots, and that Trump allies will be forced to step down or change course due to news pushed by Share Blue. George Soros must have reveled in the fantasy Brock drew up for him in order to raise their budget of $2 million to $3 million that covers just 18 employees. And right on time, Share Blue Media darling Democratic Senator Ron Wyden told the Recode Decode podcast,
I think what the Alex Jones case shows, we're going to really be looking at what the consequences are for just leaving common decency in the dust. Mm-hmm. Somebody who is a bad actor, somebody who really doesn't meet the decency principles that reflect our values. If that bad actor blows by the bounds of common decency, I think you got to have a way to make sure that stuff is taken down. With respect to Alex Jones, there are probably 1,000 accounts out there that are as bad as Alex Jones.
Right, absolutely.
Wyden is championing a totalitarian death knell of our free speech based on hearsay, spun information, and blatant lies.
First, why do you think they're starting to admit, hey, this is dangerous?
What could be more dangerous than to have a social media company decide what's true, Alex?
Flawless victory.
More revelations of a shadowy alleged conspiracy involving NATO, the UK Foreign Office and British intelligence to distort public perception of the world around them. The Integrity Initiative has been identified in the past few weeks by the purported anonymous organizational collective, which released this video on YouTube.
Britain has in fact created a large-scale information secret service in Europe, the United States and Canada, which consists of representatives of political, military, academic and journalistic communities with the think tank in London at the head of it. As part of the project, Britain has time and again intervened into domestic affairs of independent European states.
There's so many British intelligence links to our domestic Russiagate scandal, but here what we've uncovered, me and my co-author Mark Ames at the Gray Zone Project, is a effort to infiltrate American politics by this British operation called the Integrity Initiative. Now, Americans might be familiar with Operation Mockingbird. It was revealed in the 70s through the Church Commission when the CIA was actually making covert payments to hundreds of U.S. journalists during the Cold War. This is very similar. There was an obscure think tank called the Institute for Statecraft in the UK. Its internal email servers were hacked. The communications revealed the existence of the Integrity Initiative, which was covertly backed to the tune of over $2 million by the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office, which oversees the main foreign intelligence operations of the British government. And what they had done was form these little clusters of journalists and pundits and pseudo-experts across the West, including in the U.S., to coordinate their messaging campaign. And they're very clear in these documents about what they want. Number one, they want to get the West, and especially the U.S. and the U.K., on a permanent war footing against Russia. And number two, smear anyone who gets in their way. And now they're coming to the U.S., and as we've seen from the latest release of documents, the Integrity Initiative's director, who is a military intelligence colonel in the U.K., Chris Donnelly, is having high-level meetings with U.S. government officials and journalists in the U.S.
Let's talk about what their actual publicly stated goal is, right? I want to read you the definition of it. The publicly stated goal is we are a network of people and organizations from across Europe dedicated to revealing and combating propaganda and disinformation. That is their goal, to combat propaganda and disinformation. But once you look at these documents, what you find out is that they're actually performing the very definition of propaganda by creating something that they call clusters, which is essentially trying to pull together people from Hollywood, news media, politicians, think tanks, all kinds of thought leaders, and to give them the same message, which is an anti-Russia message that they can push out across Europe and into the United States. And so when you start trying to organize large groups of people to all say the same thing, Tyrell, what else is there to define propaganda?
Famed hacker group Anonymous is at it again, this time showing us how the UK is using social media to manipulate public sentiment as it pertains to Russia, at least. Now, Anonymous took to their own website for the document dumps both times. This latest one, though, included names and contact info for people in various EU countries, including Bill Browder, who they claim are all a part of this misinformation campaign. The UK have organized clusters of operatives in countries like England, Germany, Spain, and other EU nations to essentially rally around the whole Russia narrative as a scapegoat, especially as the UK is facing difficulty in the ongoing Brexit ordeal. Now, they say having Russia as the scapegoat helps to keep the population and the media all united. So, Natasha, the irony here is that the UK government is doing exactly what it's accusing Russia of doing, and that is interfering with the domestic relations of all these other countries. Now, in the psychology world, this would be called projecting, but this is politics, and what we are witnessing here is the deliberate distraction technique with the masterful use of the media and other soft powers, Natasha.
In an effort to revamp its public image and eliminate so-called Russian propaganda, Twitter is turning to a Washington, D.C.-based think tank for help. Twitter is in lockstep with Facebook after the social media giant teamed up with the Atlantic Council just 5 months ago. Facebook announced an unprecedented partnership with a major D.C. think tank this week that could have a major impact on the way you consume media on the site. On Thursday, the social media giant announced on its website that experts from the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab, quote, will work closely with our security, policy, and product teams to get Facebook real-time insights and updates on emerging threats and disinformation campaigns from around the world. Facebook added it, quote, will also use the Atlantic Council's Digital Research Unit monitoring missions during elections and other highly sensitive moments. This will allow us to focus on a particular geographic area, monitoring for misinformation and foreign interference, and also working to help educate citizens as well as civil society.
Well, the Atlantic Council is basically has been described as the academic arm of NATO. That's the short and easy description. The longer list is they basically take a lot of funding from weapons manufacturers, various governments, Western as well as Gulf governments, and they have produced some remarkable stuff over the years in terms of suggesting, for example, proposing a terrorist attack on the metro in Russia, in St. Petersburg or Moscow in 2016. They've also, this particular outfit, the research lab, is relatively new, and they have a hit list of dubious claims as well.
Now the latest purge has many wondering why these social media giants are targeting content that is created by and for Americans, and fearing that this takedown will become the new normal. But the claim that Twitter checked with the Atlantic Council first before it determined which accounts it believed were spreading Russian propaganda propaganda appears to be new, and it is concerning to many who have questioned Facebook's ties to the council. When Facebook announced it was working with the Atlantic Council in May of this year, the internet was quick to point out the problematic ties between the think tank and the U.S. government. Twitter has also felt the pressure from Congress to act on the perceived threats of election meddling and foreign influences, and it could see a relationship with the Atlantic Council as a way to appease its critics.
It's shocking that it's not more of a scandal that Facebook is turning to a U.S. government-funded entity, funded by the Pentagon, the State Department, other aspects of the U.S. government. It's essentially depending on the U.S. government to determine what can be shown on Facebook. This whole thing, as you mentioned, this whole thing is a product of this insane Russiagate hysteria that goes on and on and on like a zombie. After the election, as you point out, they dragged Zuckerberg before Congress and they pointed their fingers and yelled at him, "How dare you let some Russians take out some ads?" If you remember, the ads were these crazy things about who would Jesus want to win or something. Most of the ads were taken out after the elections, even though they wanted to claim that it was to influence the election. So the whole thing was bogus, but they wanted to take this guy to the carpet and say, "You have better crack down on your users or we're going to get you." It was what the government said to him. So he said, "What do? I don't know anything about this," as you say. So turning to the experts, the Atlantic Council, these guys are supposed to be objective experts, but they're anything but that. They're tools of the U.S. government. And here's the thing that Dr. Paul that gets me. We've talked about it before. They were brought on to enhance the investigations of foreign interference. They themselves, the Atlantic Council, is funded by foreign governments. They are the foreign interference.
Yes. Yet another plan of the UK-funded Integrity Initiative has surfaced in their fight against misinformation. The documents are the seventh part in a string of leaks that began in late 2018. They outline plans for the Expose Network, a web of European-wide companies combating misinformation. The document's map illustrates just how wide it is, stretching from the UK across to Eastern Europe. According to their terms outlined in the documents, participants are required to handle sensitive information for the state, and they also need to sign a strict non-disclosure agreement.
Even if the Integrity Initiative do stop funding these activities, you're going to find that Western governments will be diverting their resources to another organization in order to engage in propaganda. The people in the West need to become aware of the extent to which powerful actors, governments, big business engage in manipulation of public perceptions for political and economic purposes. This thing is bigger than the Integrity Initiative, and it's been going on for much longer than the Integrity Initiative. It doesn't seem to me that the mainstream media is doing its job, bringing to the attention of Western publics this kind of propaganda operation. I think if European publics were aware of all of this, they would be cross, angry, and outraged that they're being subjected to this kind of manipulation.
If Shady were an organization, it would be Integrity Initiative. Lo and behold, an army of propagandists disguised as anti-propagandists whose job is to malign, to slander, be it states, ideas, people, even British politicians. The hacktivist group Anonymous has leaked details on the operation. Integrity Initiative functions by setting up independent clusters. Candidates seem to be handpicked. Big plus if you're influential, charismatic. But the chief requirement seems to be you've got to really hate Russia.
The Integrity Initiative was set up to bring to the attention of politicians, policymakers, opinion leaders, and other interested parties the threat posed by Russia to democratic institutions in the United Kingdom, across Europe, and North America.
Now, here's what's been bugging me personally. If these white knights and self-professed fighters for the truth are what they say they are, why are they hiding? Why are they trying to stay in the shadows? But above all, these leaks, and in my view, tear the masks off the cabal that fights Russian propaganda, as they claim. And what's underneath is ugly.
the UK government and other Western governments in the US in recent years have had increasing difficulties persuading enough of their populations as to the legitimacy of the foreign policies that they've been pursuing. And at the same time, Western countries have been going through a period of political crisis and economic crisis. And I think a lot of this drive is as much about trying to shore up shaky official narratives and trying to shore up political systems in a situation of political crisis as it is actually about countering Russian propaganda. I think I would suspect that that's a little bit of an excuse here, that really what's going on are problems much closer to home. This is not just to do with the UK, this is Europe-wide, and there also are indications from the documents that they're intending to start to have some kind of impact within the United States. So it's a very wide-ranging network that seems to be established. The reason why it needs to be covert, of course, is that if a media organization or if a journalist is to let on that he or she is involved in a program which quite clearly is pushing a particular agenda, then the credibility of that journalist will be damaged. And this is really what is very deceptive about the Integrity Initiative. It's about co-opting journalists and academics into essentially a campaign which appears to be a propaganda campaign in order to manipulate opinions. And the only way that can really work effectively is if readers and viewers don't know that what they're reading is something which has emerged from a particular political agenda.
This group also got a significant recent cash donation from Facebook. It's going to get tax exemption here in the United States, if you can believe that. And it plans on targeting major cities here, according to the documents, not on the coast, since that, they say, is already taken care of in terms of their objectives. Probably the plan is to concentrate in the presidential battleground states for the 2020 elections. The way it works is people get alerts, basically run through the Foreign Office and through all the British embassies to take actions whenever they have a need to essentially do someone in through a slander or propaganda operation or similar activities. Most of the clusters for Britain and the United States are dominated by people from the Atlantic Council, which is the premier British think tank in the United States. It's also the home of something called the Digital Research Lab. The Digital Research Lab is where one Dmitry Alparovitz is located, the guy who leads CrowdStrike, and that's the company which manufactured the fake story about Russian hacking of the DNC and John Podesta. It also houses a guy by the name of Ben Nimmo, and he works both for the Integrity Initiative and the Atlantic Council. The Digital Research Lab of the Atlantic Council also was recently hired by Facebook to police and censor users of the Facebook platform.
Well, let's talk about the Digital Forensics Research Lab. You write about how it recently worked on a report commissioned by the British government meant to identify Russian bots, but they ended up just pointing the finger at real live people. Can you talk about that?
Right. Well, it was really quite amusing. The research lab was commissioned by the British government to produce reports saying, oh, these Russian bots amplified all these false flag claims about Sergei Skripal and his daughter and the chemical attack in Salisbury, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Ben Nimmo of the Digital Forensics Lab was saying, oh, if your English is not perfect, you might be a Russian bot. If you leave out an article here and there, you might be a Russian bot. It was just really quite insane.
Well, this announcement essentially means Facebook believes the Atlantic Council, including the funders you mentioned, should have final say in what is true and not true online, especially when it comes to the website. How might this partnership impact the way viewers, especially ones who might later be watching this clip on Facebook, interact with media online?
Well, Facebook has already been sort of suppressing dissident media under the guise of fighting fake news. It came under so much fire in the U.S. Congress that they felt the need to do something and basically say, oh, look, we're fixing this, because they were singled out for criticism for allegedly enabling these so-called Russian ads. So what they're doing is, instead of theoretical, alleged Russian meddling. Now you have NATO meddling in your elections.
What is a conspiracy theory? The most simplified definition is deceit. For over 20 years, Alex Jones has been suggesting that the narrative we are being fed by the mainstream media is laden with lies and should be examined. What is so strange about that? After the JFK assassination, the CIA dispatched a now declassified directive to psychological operations that stated, "The aim of this dispatch is to provide material countering and discrediting the claims of conspiracy theorists." And ever since then, mainstream pop culture has attacked and ridiculed anyone who questions their official story. After calling attention to the lies and criminal activity of the past 4 presidents, Alex Jones recognized a potential champion for liberty in candidate Donald Trump and utilized his platform to help get him elected, thereby proving the effective power that the InfoWars platform has on the political stage and making Alex Jones the main enemy of the failing deep state propaganda machine. On August 6, 2018, Alex Jones was banned from social media.
Alex Jones, the host of InfoWars, was banned from Apple, Facebook, Spotify, and YouTube today.
On March 27th, Business Insider reported an Alex Jones Instagram post to Facebook in an attempt to have the account banned. In a show of transparency, Business Insider published an internal email from Facebook the following day, revealing how Facebook admitted that Alex Jones did not violate their community standards, but stated that there's currently internal discussions around his designation as a hate figure. Leader of the Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan has long exercised his freedom of speech to criticize the U.S. government. He is also well known for his harsh criticism of Israel, which he refers to as the synagogue of Satan. In 2018, Farrakhan made headlines for referring to Jews as termites.
You know what they do? Call me an anti-Semite. Stop it. I'm anti-termite.
And Laura Loomer used his tweet as proof of social media's hypocritical bias against conservative voices.
I'm not anti-Semite, I'm anti-termite. I mean, this is all still on Twitter.
This is precisely why Farrakhan was recently banned along with Alex Jones. Farrakhan was sacrificed by Facebook so they can claim they are targeting so-called extremists rather than conservatives.
Alex Jones's company InfoWars was banned as well and described as a dangerous organization. How dangerous is InfoWars? Well, Facebook believes it's so dangerous that you can be banned from using the platform, Facebook, just for sharing its content unless you simultaneously denounce it.
The only thing dangerous to these people is the truth. And the truth is the only thing that will liberate us from their lies. Alex Jones is only the beginning. If they can silence his voice, then the First Amendment is dead, and America's freedom becomes a ghost of the past. For NewsWars.com, this is Greg Reese.
InfoWars, tomorrow's news today.
President Trump's furious reaction to Facebook's action showcases that he is, I'm sorry to say, the InfoWars president.
CNN's panel of totalitarian wannabes is setting the table for the ban of President Trump's social media presence.
Trump is doing this because he needs people to believe that Facebook is against him and that Facebook is biased against him, because that's the only way that he has the space to operate on Facebook. And so if they go after InfoWars for misleading content, if they go after Milo, if they go after any of these folks, he's going to be next. And so that's why he's doing that, because he needs to be able to draw a he can't let them draw a distinction between what InfoWars is doing and what NBC or CNN or any mainstream media organization is doing.
Even though what we get from InfoWars is
conspiracy theory crap.
Well, these are very extreme individuals, and no matter what anyone tells you, they are extremists, and that's why Facebook decided to get rid of them from the platform the other day. And back to your point, though, about the InfoWars presidency, I want to know, and I tweeted this the other day, what is the difference at this point between Trump's Twitter feed and Infowars.com? You know, Infowars might have been banned from Twitter, but it seems to have found a new home over at Trump's Twitter feed. And while he's promoting and legitimizing this news organization, we should also talk about how he's trying to tear down credible sources for news, the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN.
And while CNN hides behind the Facebook is a private company so we can censor free speech, regardless of the First Amendment excuse, does that mean Facebook can violate any and all of its users' Bill of Rights? And what about CNN, who has systematically targeted the president over a false collusion narrative?
Speculation actually has value too. It helps open our eyes, helps open our minds to what's possible. I know people like to mock cable news in moments like this. It's an easy punchline, right? We are kind of standing by to find out what the news is going to be, waiting for AG Barr to tell us something. But that does have value too.
Targeted Trump-supporting teenagers in D.C.
Where were the chaperones? Why did a school event involve MAGA hats? Then we get to the heart of it. The face-to-face encounter. The man, Nathan Phillips, apparently wanted to diffuse the tension, and he walked up to do exactly that. And surely the kid, Nick Sandman, he doesn't seem to be afraid, but he did make a choice, and that was to make it into a standoff.
Even in the case of the Covington school, I guess what I would have wanted was for them to maybe, be disciplined in some way by their school, and then there'd be some sort of reconciliation, right? They would apologize and for whatever part they played in it, and Nathan Phillips could apologize for whatever part he played in it. There could be some kind of reconciliation. But the truth of the matter is, in the current climate that we live in, that was very naive of me. The punishment is going to be that you are going to have this following around for the rest of your life.
And openly targeted tax-paying Americans by supporting Antifa.
You want to talk about Antifa or Black Lives Matter or any of the groups that assembled that day to fight against neo-Nazis, you make a moral equivalent between those two actions, you're making a mistake in America. The president did it that day. And you know it was a mistake. I don't know why you don't own that.
No. Chris, you and I have talked about this before. I do not make any differentiation between neo-Nazis and Antifa. Just because they claim in their name that they are anti-fascist, their tactics are, in fact, totally fascist.
One of the
people
groups
who
was
put on
created to kill people they don't like. The other group,
and so was
Black
Antifa.
Lives Matter,
Antifa
has hangers-on and aberrant actors within their ranks. But the groups were not created to destroy parts of humanity.
Explain to me the reasoning behind fighting.
You have to make it so unpalatable to be doing white supremacist organizing that they no longer want to do that. And historically, that's what's worked. You have to put your body in the way, and you have to make it speak in a language that they understand, and sometimes that is violence.
They are America's brown shirts, and there is no difference between Antifa and those neo-Nazis. Both sides are thugs. Both sides are reprehensible.
Antifa, a communist-leaning organization hell-bent on the takedown of the United States.
Kamau Bell is, among other things, a host on CNN. He fronts a show on that channel called United Shades of America. It's run there for 2 seasons now. Bell calls himself a political provocateur, but that doesn't quite capture it. In fact, he is a supporter of Antifa. So we couldn't get a response out of CNN, which is a little odd for a news organization to refuse to comment about something. Is this within bounds, though, for one of their hosts to be addressing a rally like this filled with people in black masks, Antifa, through a bullhorn?
Let's be clear who Antifa is. Obviously, they're a group that even Nancy Pelosi has denounced. Laura Ingraham on this network has suggested they should be labeled a terror organization. Berkeley's mayor has called them a criminal gang. So this is not a group that you want any network host within 1,000 yards of at a rally addressing. There's a hard and fast rule at every news organization, Tucker, and that is that hosts cannot, or journalists or reporters for that matter, cannot attend rallies or speak at rallies that its newsroom may be covering.
Is there anything we can do to stop what is amounting to full-blown treason, occupying televisions across the United States? Why, yes. Yes, there is. 18 U.S. Code 2385, advocating overthrow of government, reads, Whoever knowingly or willfully advocates, abets, advises, or teaches the duty, necessity, desirability, or propriety of overthrowing or destroying the government of the United States by force or violence or by assassination of any officer of any such government.
As a former government official, government's going to kill this guy.
Whoever with intent to cause the overthrow or destruction of any such government prints, publishes, edits, issues, circulates, sells, distributes.
Chris, the way you edited that segment that you showed just before this was appallingly misleading because you cut the quote off at a critical juncture. If you continue the quote you were showing, and I want to quote directly here because I want to be extremely precise. He said, you had people in that group who were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. He then continued in the next answer, I am not talking about the neo-Nazis and white nationalists because they should be condemned totally, end quote. So he was unequivocal that he was not talking about racists or neo-Nazis, but the way you deceptively edited what you just showed
there's nothing
made it look
about
as though he was.
All right, so Rob.
Or publicly displays any written or printed matter advocating, advising, or teaching the duty, necessity, desirability, or propriety of overthrowing or destroying any government in the United States by force or violence.
Oh, Nazis canceled! There is no national Antifa group. It is mostly made up of people who are far left of center, who make it their mission to battle fascists, racists, and alt-right extremists. Behind the masks are people from all walks of life, artists, moms, ordinary Americans, as well as anarchists. But one of the interesting things that I found in doing this reporting, what's really surprised me, is that we found that a lot of these new Antifa members, they're young people, disenfranchised young people who felt that they were let down by both parties after the election, and this is where they ended up.
Why hunt these people down? Like, what is your goal? To expose them?
Exactly, because no one's paying attention to them, and sooner or later, they're going to be your police officers, they're going to be your politicians, they're going to be your teachers. They are going to be people that you cannot touch, and I don't want that to happen.
Now, that sounds awesome, right? This guy's basically working to expose them by doxing them online.
Whoever organizes or helps or attempts to organize any society, group, or assembly of persons who teach, advocate, or encourage the overthrow or destruction of any such government by force or violence shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years or both. Patriots, start your engines. Let the treason trials begin. John Bound reporting.
If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.
"10 years out of law school, 36-year-old James Comey joined the Clinton administration and acted as deputy special counsel to the Senate Whitewater Committee during investigations for Whitewater, Filegate, and Chinagate, all of which the Clintons were let off the hook for. So it's no surprise that in July of 2016, Comey let Hillary off the hook again for violating federal law when she was caught using private servers for the transfer of classified material.
Although there is evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case.
2 months later, at an Ohio rally, Trump expresses his distrust in James Comey and the DOJ.
After the FBI or Department of Justice whitewashed Hillary Clinton's email crimes, they certainly cannot be trusted to quickly or impartially investigate Hillary Clinton's new crimes, which happen all the time.
Around this time, the unverified Steele dossier was used in a FISA submission to spy on the newly elected administration. The United States Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court was established under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978 to oversee requests for surveillance warrants against foreign spies inside the United States. NSA analyst Russ Tice called it a kangaroo court with a rubber stamp, and there has been growing criticism of the FISA court since 9/11.
Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, the FISA court.
We do respect the Fourth Amendment in this country, and we issue warrants based on suspicion, but sometimes these warrants have to be issued by secret courts so we don't alert the suspects we're spying on. And these court proceedings are classified, which means, surprise, they don't appear in papers such as the New York Times.
On May 9th of 2017, President Trump fires James Comey. Aloof and disgraced, James Comey begins a book tour and a strange habit of tweeting out reflective self-portraits. In January of 2018, InfoWars releases the secret FISA memo. In April of 2018, Comey comes under fire for leaking classified memos. And now that the Mueller witch hunt has ended, the tables are turning against Comey and the deep state.
There's another report that everybody has forgotten about involving James Comey alone. That will be out in 2 weeks. That report is going to be a bombshell. It's going to open up the investigation on a very high note, and there will be criminal referrals in it. James Comey, America's dirty cop, ate the soul of the FBI. He destroyed the FBI. And this little piece of paper, which is the FISA court ruling from 2017, is going to be their undoing.
The attempted coup against President Trump is not over. But James Comey may be the first domino to fall in what patriots hope to be the dismantling of America's criminal deep state. For newswars.com, this is Greg Reese.